All right. So, hi everyone. I'm Debra Mazer, and I'm here with a very special relative of mine. Her name is Alice Slater, and she is my mom's cousin. So technically, I think she's my second cousin. And I'm going to read you a little bio. So Alice and I actually have connected more recently over what's going on in Israel and Palestine, because we both share a common belief in ceasefire, and we both, Alice has been sharing a lot of information and articles, and I just thought her voice needs to be heard and amplified, and her face needs to be shown. So, and it turns out Alice has been wanting to also share more of her story around Israel. So I'm going to read you a little bio. So Alice Slater serves on the board of World Beyond War, and she's a UN NGO representative of the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation. She's on the board of the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space, the Global Council of Abolition 2000, and the Advisory Board of Nuclear Ban US, supporting the mission of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, which won the 2017 Nobel Peace Prize for its work in realizing the successful UN negotiations for a treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons. She began her long quest for peace on Earth as a suburban housewife when she organized Eugene McCarthy's presidential challenge to Johnson's illegal war in Vietnam in her local community, which I believe that was probably in the late 60s. As a member of the Lawyers Alliance for Nuclear Arms Control, she traveled to Russia and China on numerous delegations engaged in ending the arms race and banning the bomb. She's a member of the New York City Bar Association and served on the People's Climate Committee, New York City, working for 100% green energy by 2030. She has written numerous articles and op-eds with frequent appearances on local and national media. So honored to be here with Alice. And yeah, just again, so we've met probably about 20 years ago in person, but we're sort of distant cousins, and I'm just so grateful to be reconnected with you in this way. And I'm grateful to be also surrounded with, quote unquote elders, not that you're old, but elders
Well, I
in
am
the
old.
family that believe this, that are on the same page that I am with questioning Israel right now, and standing for peace. So anyway, I know you have a whole story because you is it okay if I share your age?
Yes, sure.
Oh yes, Alice is
I'm
85.
proud.
She's probably 85 years young. So you were there when, in the 40, like when Israel was first, came to be, and you have a whole story around it.
I lived during the Holocaust. I mean, my father's family came from Poland and they had relatives that we knew disappeared. He had a half brother there that disappeared in Warsaw, Poland. I mean, it was so sad. No, and when Israel became a state, we were so thrilled. I mean, my mother was Hadassah president. She was working for Israel. My father was in anti-defamation. They were all working for Jewish causes. We were very affected by all of this, in my
Right.
childhood. And when Israel became a state, we were like so happy. This was so wonderful. I mean, the sad thing, nobody would take the Jews in after the Holocaust, so but I didn't realize what was going on. I mean, England, it was a colony of England, and England said, well, they ganged up with America and France, so they said, well, nobody wants the Jews, but give them a piece of Palestine. And we didn't know this. I mean, we were like totally ignorant. We were just so happy about Israel. We were giving money to Israel. My mother was running a rummage sale every year to raise money for Hadassah Hospital, and and that was how it went.
Right.
And yeah, and I just didn't pay attention to anything. And years later, as you read in my bio, I got active In 1968, I was a housewife with 2 babies living in Massapequa, Long Island, in a suburb, and I'm watching television one night, and they showed old news films like Edward R. Murrow or, Walter Christ, when they did real news on the news. And they showed Ho Chi Minh in 1919, the president of Vietnam, going to Woodrow Wilson after World War One ended, begging us to help them get the French out of Vietnam. The French was so cruel to the Vietnamese. They had rubber plantations, just like we had cotton plantations. They had rubber, they would enslave them. They kept them in cages. And we turned them down because France was our ally. And the Soviets were more than happy to help him. And that's how Ho Chi Minh became a communist. And I'm watching this on television. He even modeled his constitution on ours. They wanted to be a democracy, The same night, 68, the kids at Columbia University in my city, in New York City, were rioting. They were breaking down the doors and screaming and breaking windows. They did not want to be drafted for Vietnam. Everybody knew it was a terrible, stupid war. And I was terrified. I had just turned 30. Their expression then was, don't trust anyone over 30. And my husband came home that night and I said, what's the matter with these kids? Don't they know it's America? We have a political process. Why aren't we doing it? I better do something about it. So 2 nights later, the Massapequa Democratic Club was having a debate between the Hawks and the Doves. And I joined the Doves and I became active in Eugene McCarthy's campaign. And he did not win the nomination. He ran to stop the war against Johnson, and he didn't win. And for the next 4 years, we worked door to door. I went door to door. We got Democrats to vote for George McGovern, who was going to end the war. And I did it for 2 years in Massapequa, my husband's job. We moved to Maryland. I kept doing it door to door in Maryland. And 1972, we go to the convention, the Democratic convention, and George McGovern gets the nomination, an anti-war candidate.
Wow.
And that's when I knew the fix was in, because the New York Times never wrote an honest word about him. They never wrote that he was against the war for women's rights and gay rights. It was all the 60s that we took over the whole Democratic Party. We owned it. The peace movement and the women's movement and the civil rights. We were all the good guys. So, and all the Times wrote about, he had a vice president from Missouri. I know this is a long story, but I'm going to get to Israel.
No,
Is
it's
that
okay.
right? Yeah. So he had a vice president, Thomas Eagleton, a senator from Colorado, who 20 years earlier had been hospitalized with manic depression. And that was the front page story in the Times every day. It was like OJ and Monica's stupid stuff. And he had to get him off the ticket, and he lost very badly. He never got his ideas out. And after that, I mean, if you remember recently that Bernie had all that money and all those votes, and he gets there and Hillary wins the nomination because there's a super delegates.
Right.
They put super delegates in because of us, because there were no super delegates then. It was real democracy, and we won the nomination. But forget it. There's a lot we're fighting with here. There's a lot. I have a friend, Ray McGovern. He was a CIA agent. And he left, he briefed Clinton and Bush. He was top guy every morning. He gave them the morning briefing, and then he left. He was in New York. He had gone to Fordham University, and he was now in the peace movement. And he said to me one day, Alice, it's not the military-industrial complex. You know how President Eisenhower, the general, warned against it? It's the Mickey Mat. I said, Ray, what's the Mickey Mat? Military, industrial, congressional, intelligence, academic, think tank, media complex. And we're getting this message. We're not getting the truth about anything.
Right.
So that's why we don't know about Israel either. Now, I happened to find out because after McGovern won the nomination, I moved to Great Neck. I wound up leaving my husband in Maryland. I come to Great Neck with the 2 kids. And Great Neck has the best schools in America, so I'm in Great Neck for my children. and I'm in an apartment because I couldn't afford private school, and everybody's divorced, and it's the 70s, and we're all, so I call my friends on the McGovern campaign. It's a summer, July. The election was in November. And I said, I'm back from Maryland. I'm back in New York, and I would like to I'm getting divorced. I have to get a job, but give me a little job I can do for McGovern. They said, Alice will pay you. So I worked for a guy that was a professional fundraiser at the Anti-Defamation League and another one for Abaddon. They were like in their job every day, and I was the clerk. I went into the office. I wrote the invitations. I put the money in the bank. It was like $1,000 a person. I mean, we had these two amazing parties for McGovern. One was in Robert Benjamin's house. He was president of United Artists. And when I walked in the house, there were Van Goghs and Renoirs and Monets on the wall. I said, oh my God, in somebody's private house. Anyway, when it was over, the guy who was working at Anti-Defamation League said, Alice, you're very good at this, and they need a fundraiser. Why don't you apply? So I did, and I didn't want to go back to teaching, and my mother said I had to be a teacher. So I go back to, I'm a fundraiser. And as part of our Jewish education, the Anti-Defamation League, which today is a big part of AIPAC,
Right.
but at that time, everybody loved Israel. I mean, there was no problem with Israel. So they gave us a 2-week tour, the staff. After I was there for a couple of years, we had a 2-week tour of Israel. It was like in 79.
I was one. I was 1 year old then.
All right, but I mean, it was early, and
Right,
I've
early on.
never heard a bad word about Israel, right? So this is ADL. They're like big movers and shakers. They got a lot of influence, and they're giving us a terrific tour. So we come in, we have a meeting with Rabin, who was the prime minister, who actually went for the two-state and negotiated with Arafat, and the Jews killed him. Right-wing Jews killed him and destroyed the peace process at that time, But that wasn't then. Then we met him. Then we met with this philosopher, Myron Ben-Benisti, was so incredible. And then they bring in this woman who looked like, well, you don't know who Bella Abzug was, but she was like a real bulvan, and she was a member of the Israeli Knesset. She was a parliamentarian, and her name was Shulamith Aloni. And she came in and started screaming at us. We were 10 Americans. You American Jews, you're such hypocrites. Why do you support every stupid thing this government does? Don't you know we have a peace now party? I looked at her. I had never heard a bad word about Israel. I'm sitting there with this member of the Israeli parliament yelling at me for being an idiot, that I don't know that there's a peace party and that they have problems there. This is in 79. I was like in a state of shock. Then they take us to Hebron. I mean, I got to give them credit. They showed us everything. So Hebron was on the West Bank. It was teeming with Arabs. And there was one apartment building surrounded by Israeli soldiers with rifles. And a Jewish kid from Chicago comes down wearing a yarmulke. He's living in that building. And he's with Maya Kahani's group. These are like right-wing Israeli terrorists, right? He's living there with the Israeli soldiers guarding him. And he comes down. I said to him, what are you doing here? I said, they just gave the Sinai back to Egypt. How are you going to make peace if you live here? He says, we don't care. The Bible says Judea and Samaria belong to the Jewish people. And it's the right-wing evangelicals in America that think that when the Jews occupy Judea and Samaria, Jesus is going to come back. And then, of course, we'll all go to hell. But they're supporting it. That's what's supporting it. I mean, like, to me, it was like so shocking. And this was 1979. And then they wound up killing Rabin, and everybody was for the two-state solution. There is no two-state solution anymore because it's like a Bantustan. And the only thing is like what South Africa did. We need a one-state solution where they give up apartheid and they all live together the way South Africa did. They had a truth and reconciliation. You could come and commit and tell the truth about all your murders and your crimes and say you're sorry and we forgive you. Nobody got punished. This was like Archbishop Tutu and Nelson Mandela did this incredible process in South Africa. And there are Israelis now talking about that. There's a book by Miko Peled, the general's son. He's an Israeli. He's the son of a big Israeli general that won a lot in the 68 war and worked with Rabin for the, to recognize the PLO. He was moving. He died, but the son, he was for the two-state solution, Miko Peled. He was working hard at it. But the son now says there is no such thing anymore. It can't be done anymore. We have to really all live together. And I mean, when you think in the biblical story, Abraham is our father. There's the Old Testament story. Abraham is married to Sarah. She's barren. She says to him, lay with my handmaiden Hagar so you can have a son. And he has a son, Ishmael. And when Sarah's 90 years old, she gets pregnant and has a baby. And she gives birth to Isaac. And she doesn't like how Ishmael plays with Isaac. And she says to Abraham, get rid of them. And he throws them out of the house, Hagar and Ishmael. This is the Arab story. This is how they start. We're brothers. We got the same father. I mean, we must figure this out.
Right.
We must figure this out. We can't bomb them into pieces. I mean, Adolf Netanyahu over there, he wants to destroy them. He just wants to destroy them like Hitler wanted to destroy the Jews, And of course, none of the Arab countries are going to take them in. They didn't the first time. And then I started reading the history that we never knew, that there were 1.5 million Palestinians living there. And there are famous Jews that thought Zionism was a bad idea, like Einstein wrote about it. He said, Jews, we're not a people, it's a religion. We should live there. We should go there, but live in Palestine with everybody else, live in peace, not to make it a Jewish state, because what happens to all those other people there? I mean, that's what South Africa did. They made it a white state. How could they, if there were already people there? We have to figure it out here. Well, we really did a good job here. We slaughtered so many, we didn't have to worry about it. I'm laughing. I mean, this is the white corporate patriarchy that we're part of. This has to end. It has to end. And, as Jews, I think we have a special responsibility to say what's right and just. That was, well, we were like the keepers of the laws. God, chose. What are we chosen for? We're supposed to be the chosen people. What did he choose us for? I mean, that's our mythology.
Right. Yeah, and then they also say, after all we've been through, right, with the Holocaust
But how could we become what we were? Or how could we do what we were? I mean, it's like they were making a Holocaust for those people. And they're our brothers. We have the same father.
Right.
That's another part of the myth, the story, that we have to take it in and just be with it and figure it out. And Nelson Mandela and Archbishop Tutu, I mean, they really figured it out. They did something that was so great. Even the clerk, the white president, he became part of it. They won the Nobel Peace Prize, Mandela and de Klerk, the two of them, for ending it. And our country right now, America, we're the only country that vetoed a ceasefire in the UN. We have such power in that veto.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the Israel story. From my perspective,
Yeah.
the only way to move forward is to move forward as one state in peace. And we have to have a lot of healing. And we have an example. A country did it. They had just as much murder and torture and horrible stuff between the blacks and the whites in South Africa. It was awful. And the whole world boycotted them and that's why we were starting the boycotting stuff with Israel that they got crazy about.
Right.
Anyway.
What would you say, like, back when you first visited Israel and learned, more of the situation, and then also now in this day and time, what were some things that you specifically were specifically upsetting to become aware of?
I was aware of it, but I didn't do anything about it. I was going on to other things like banning nuclear weapons. I mean, it wasn't
Right.
in my consciousness the way it is now, with Netanyahu
Right now.
starting, up till now they were, well, first of all, I felt good that, Carter was instrumental and Rabin and Arafat. I felt like they were gonna, they would work it out. I wasn't paying that much attention to Israel. That wasn't really my thing. It's like now nobody can ignore it because it's our thing. The United States is the only country enabling it. We're giving them the arms to do the slaughter. How could this be America? What kind of America is this?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's worse about America than Israel
Mm-hmm.
because we have such an image of ourselves, like we have a lot to go through, a lot of truth and reconciliation we need.
Mm-hmm. And when you say, like, now, I think we're all becoming more aware, right? But yet there's still a lot of people that still don't really know, because maybe it's not being shown on the mainstream news, or, it's like you
Well,
have to
that's
actually kind of look at, these certain organizations to sort of learn,
right.
the other perspective, right?
And people with our perspective, you can't talk to your family sometimes. And that's because they're getting such a skewed view in the news.
Mm-hmm.
The news is so bad, it doesn't tell you anything.
Right, right.
I even passed a bad email around. I felt so bad. Bernie Sanders, who hasn't been good, they haven't been good on Israel in the Congress. Even the progressives, they said maybe there should be a peace ceasefire. There were about 20 that signed and technically just not even saying don't sell arms, but there should be a ceasefire. And they had to retract it, like Alexandria court, AOC,
Oh,
and
AOC, yeah.
the whole bunch of them that wanted to be progressive, they weren't allowed to be. And Bernie just issued this great statement about how we're spending too much money and on the military.
Right.
But I didn't read the whole statement carefully, and I was circulating it. And then a friend of mine from the Veterans of Peace in China group, who knows all about the crappy stuff we're doing to China, pointed out that Bernie said if we spent less money, if we cleaned up and did audits, we never see how much, we don't check on them, then we'd have some money to give Ukraine. I mean, that was what he was saying, which is terrible. We should not be giving arms to Ukraine. No way. No way should we be empowering that fight.
Mm.
We had so many opportunities to just say, yes, we won't take Ukraine into NATO. Putin made that his red line 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 2 weeks before he invaded. He was even negotiating with Zelensky a couple of months after the war started, and we flew Boris Johnson, that British warmonger, in to break up the talks.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
we are a war machine right now. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. I just think it's so powerful because I feel like within Jewish communities, sometimes Jewish community can write off, members of our own community that are for ceasefire, like, oh, you're just young, or you're misinformed, right? But that's why I think your voice is so important, because it's like, you're not.
No, but I know I'm definitely hindered in who I can speak to about these things.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're living in a bubble, in a brainwash bubble of the Mickey Mac that Ray McGovern. I didn't tell you when he left the CIA, he formed VIPs, Veterans Intelligence Professionals for Sanity.
Uh-huh.
And he's telling the truth, if you listen to it.
Right. So if you had a message for you know, maybe Jewish people that might be watching this video that, you know, something that, would you have a message maybe of sharing like something that they might not be aware of, or that you'd like to convey, like people to sort of open up and hear from you, an 85-year-old, you know, Jewish woman living in New York who has, you know, been around these movements for a very long time? What would be your...
Well, I think I would like you to think about how you're getting your news today, because I think that's the hardest thing to overcome. If you're getting the wrong story over and over and over again, how can we convince each other, you know?
Mhm.
So I suggest that you look at other ways of getting your news than the as we call it, the lamestream media, you know, or the Mickey Mac, which is designed to create a message. I mean, President Biden's team right now comes from Bush and Cheney. You know, yes, we hate Trump. I mean, Trump is terrible. Nobody wants Trump. But I mean, is that enough to say, don't say anything bad about Biden because you get Trump? I mean, with Biden, we're getting a war in Ukraine, a war in Gaza, and now he's putting arms to Taiwan. You know, Nixon and Kissinger negotiated with China not to have a war there. So what would I say to Jewish people? It's not even Jewish people, it's American people. It's not a Jewish problem, it's an American problem.
American.
Because what I've learned was that Israel was always our military arsenal in the Middle East to look out for the oil. I mean, we were always empowering Israel, and it had nothing to do with loving the Jews, because we wouldn't take one single one in during the Holocaust. We
The
sent
United
them
States
all
wouldn't
away.
take Jewish
Yeah,
during
it
the
had nothing to do with loving the Jews. It was like having a willing sucker there that would be our guard dog for the Iran oil and this, you know, and all the wars that we're in. There's so much we have to learn, but if you really want to be inspired, I would read The General's Son by Miko Peled, P-E-L-E-D,
Okay.
because he's an Israeli and he grew up with, you know, all the things that we always believed. And he is now working with Arabs in Israel to get a one-state healing solution. And that's really the only thing that will work. The rest is...
And do you have any suggestion on where people could get their news from an alternative source? Besides, they could click on your Facebook page. You've been posting lots of articles.
Yeah, well, I mean, my favorite thing right now that I'm on the board of World Beyond War.
World Beyond War.
And that organization is run by David Swanson's the executive director. He was Dennis Kucinich's speechwriter, and Dennis Kucinich was like a real peace candidate. He was against the Iraq war when everybody was for it. And he was a congressman from Ohio who ran for president. And when he didn't win the primary, you know, he didn't, but the Democrats in Ohio redistricted him so he could not run for Congress and win. They didn't want a peace voice in Congress. Dennis was the only one. If you needed a bill for nuclear disarmament or whatever, you know, you could count on Dennis. There's nobody in Congress now that'll even do that.
Mm.
So I would go to War Beyond War, and they put up articles all the time and different, and then from there you'll get what you need. And the group that's doing fabulous work, I don't even think we mentioned it in my bio, but Code Pink, the women's group, they're fabulous.
Oh, okay.
When they bombed the World Trade Center and Bush was saying code orange, code red for alert, code yellow for danger, the women came out and said, we're code pink for peace.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the proper response to 911? To bomb the crap out of Afghanistan? Give me a break. I mean, what did Afghanistan ever do to New York?
Right.
The guys that actually bombed it were from Saudi Arabia. And, you know, the last chapter of the 911 report is still classified. The Kennedy assassination is classified. And Trump, the broken clock that's right twice a day, he wanted unclassified and they wouldn't let him, you know. He wanted to declassify the Warren Commission, 50 years old, you know. Kennedy gave this incredible peace speech. It's going around now. Just, I would Google Kennedy's peace speech at American University. And 5 months later, he was dead. That's, I mean, and there are books that think he was. I mean, I was home watching when this happened. My husband worked for CBS News. He was in the news department. He was always going. He didn't come home for 3 days when Kennedy got shot. And we're watching on the news that a bullet goes through the governor and through the same bullet that hit the Connolly, the Texas guy, killed Kennedy. It went through, and then the killer gets killed the next day. I mean, nobody thought that made any sense.
Mm.
We still don't know. They won't declassify it.
People don't want any voices for peace.
Right. Well, I would definitely go, you know, go to World Beyond War, look at Amy Goodman's show,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, there's
Love
different
Amy.
ones. Chris Hedges, you know, there's
Yeah.
people,
There's
but it
people.
has to be on the internet, like it's not on the radio.
Because like you said, the news, the mainstream news, we were talking earlier, you were sharing, doesn't report everything.
Right. But World Beyond War has a list of media articles. It keeps putting out things that you should be looking about that are working for people, you know, that give you the other side of the story.
Yeah,
There's definitely another side. We're not here.
right. Right. Well, thank you so much, Alice. If people would like to stay in touch with you, how can they find you? If they maybe people want to interview you further or talk with you further.
Um, yeah, I'm on Facebook.
Facebook.
You
Yeah,
can find me there.
I'll
Yeah.
tag this video
And
there.
also World Beyond War has my bio up there. I'm on the board. So
Okay.
I would go to World Beyond War and you can get
World
some of
Beyond
that.
War. Okay. Wonderful. Well, thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. I'm going to go ahead and stop our live stream. Thank you, Alice.
Thank you. It was great.